First of all, I'm just going to do a really brief introduction about the what, the who, why 3D, and then I'm going to show a clip of the pre-title tease of the programme. The what is Flying Monsters? It's a story of pterosaurs. Pterosaurs were flying reptiles that ruled the skies for 150 million years until they were extinguished at the same time as the dinosaurs. And it's just a story that David Attenborough had long wanted to tell. So the who is David. He and Anthony, while on location for our BBC series, First Life, got talking one night over a bottle of wine and about telling the story of pterosaurs. And that seemed like a fantastic plan. Then we realized that Sky was setting up its 3D channel, and having a story about creatures and environments that don't exist, and having a story that David wanted to tell, all those things came together, and it was lucky. We were lucky. Why 3D? As I said, we wanted to bring environments and creatures to life, but we also wanted to use a new storytelling tool in our palette. Atlantic's reputation is, I think, for very high quality storytelling. We wanted to add to the tools available to us. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the pre-title tease, and then I'm going to talk next about a little bit more about why we decided to work in 3D, and then I'll show in total, I'm going to show 6 clips, which I hope will illustrate various storytelling techniques that 3D enhanced. Thank you. I'm going to talk a bit more now about why we worked in 3D. As I mentioned before, we had to realize creatures and environments that obviously don't exist anymore. But we also wanted to show flight, which isn't something which is easy to film. But very importantly as well, this is a science documentary, and I'll come back to that more later. We knew that 3D would add an immediate sense of scale and shape and distance and detail. I think that's an important point. And it's also very immersive, which I hope you could tell from that clip, helped by the sound design a lot, which was done by Halo. So we wanted to bring the new dimension to the whole documentary story, and we wanted to use that new storytelling tool. But I think really important, and I think this is something that's been touched on yesterday as well, it's still all about having a really strong story. I think that's absolutely so important. The 3D is just something which can enhance that storytelling. We can use the screen space to add impact, for example, the tail flicking out or the animal grabbing its prey, but we really wanted to avoid gimmicky 3D. This is our first 3D project. We wanted the 3D to be low risk, very careful and considered. Another thing you'll see more of is that sort of diagrammatic CGI. The 3D depth really adds to how we can explain scientific points, and really brings, the 3D helps bring key story points to life. And I think you'll also see later, I hope, that it adds fun, which I think is something which this film really uses in a positive way. And I think another thing that's been touched on yesterday, but I'd like to emphasize, is that more than any production I've ever worked on, this one has been all about teamwork. It's taken a team to realize it from the very beginning, where Anthony and David were coming up, Anthony the producer, Anthony Geffen and David were coming up with the idea. Matt Dias, the director's vision to sort of realize, Matt Dias's help in realizing David's vision. Tim Cragg, the director of photography, Chris Parks, who I know spoke yesterday, the stereographer, the VFX team, Zoo, Envisage, who did the previs, Molyneux and CVFX, Vision 3, Angus Cameron, the post-stereographer, and the editor, Pete Miller, and the edit producer, Martin Williams, and the post houses on site in Halo, and C.S. Wilson, the line producer. Every single one of those people and companies was instrumental in this. And I think that's the fact that it takes a team to realize it is a really, really important point, but that's something I'll come back to. I'd like to show the next clip, which is you'll see more of how we realized the first creature that we show in the film in a prehistoric environment. Thank you. From what you've seen now, it would be quite easy to imagine that the whole film was CGI. It wasn't. It was about 25% CGI. And I think what I want to talk about next is how we were on a massive learning curve doing this project. And it was with the team of people I mentioned before, the scripting and planning process, we were learning right from the off about how we could use 3D to enhance the storytelling. And the next clip that I'm going to show, I hope, will illustrate that. But I can't emphasize enough planning. The storyboarding and the planning took weeks. And it wasn't just the director taking weeks to write a script, as we all know can happen. It was the whole team, all those people I mentioned together, for the post house, all the way through to the whole production, creative production team worked together to plan the 3D. We had big scripting meetings where the director and the DOP, might have planned a beautiful shot, but Chris, a stereographer, would need to change how we visualized that shot because it wouldn't work in 3D. Every shot was storyboarded, every single shot in the film. In terms of how long things took, it was very much sort of film discipline. And with the help of the 3D experts, Vision 3 and On-Site, as we worked through the process, we learnt how much more we could use 3D than probably we'd even realised at the beginning. I'm not going to talk logistics or how we did the 3D, because I think other people have already covered that. But I will mention that shooting in 3D, as I think everyone probably already knows, is vastly more complex, logistically, obviously, as well as creatively, than 2D. But the first thing I want to show about really what we learnt as we went along was about innovative ways of bringing science to life using 3D. And this is a science documentary, and it's a story that really is based on fossil evidence. And I'd be rich if I had a £1 for every time I've sat down with a development team and talked about a story based on fossils and tried to push them to think about how we'll make a program about stones look visually exciting. I think the next clip that I'm going to show, which uses macro 3D, will show you how something incredibly simple, which would look beautiful in 2D, creates a whole landscape in 3D. And one of the other things about 3D, which I think many of the things I'll say are probably blindingly obvious, but they're worth saying, is 3D holds the viewer's attention for longer. We were able to hold shots for 10 seconds or more that wouldn't have been nearly so immersive in 2D. They would still have been beautiful, but they wouldn't have been so thrilling. And I think you'll also see how subtle camera movement, both in the shoot and added later in post, both on the shot footage and on CGI, can help the viewer. I mean, in 2D, you use camera movement to help the viewer get where you want to go. But in 3D, I think the space and depth and the camera movement helps point the story up even more.